We're joined by Jack Devnarain from the SA Guild of Actors tonight to speak to us about this. Jack, good evening, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
It's certainly been, it's taken a lot of work to get these bills into the President's office. There were calls for him to sign them into legislation. Let's talk about the lobbying that has been taking place. The President says the questions he's raising are based on the fact that he's received written submissions from people. Perhaps let's begin firstly with the Performance Protection Amendment Bill. What are the issues that you think have been raised with it, and do you agree that they're legitimate at all?
Absolutely. The provisions contained in both the bills are critical for the sustainability of the audiovisual industry, for the rights of actors to be promoted. And in fact, we must also question whether the President has at this point indeed returned those bills to the Portfolio Committee. It's our understanding that he may be considering it. And the reason we question this is because there are a number of provisions that have to be looked at in their totality, and it's not just a matter of cherry-picking the items that you feel might not pass constitutional muster. In fact, both the bills have indeed been adopted by both the National Assembly, which was in November last year, and the National Council of Provinces, which was the end of March this year. So it's now 222 days today since those bills arrived at the President's desk, and we are yet to have an indication what his intentions are. If the President indeed intends returning the bills to the National Assembly, it will have to be, it will have to be necessarily because of a constitutional conflict, and for no other grounds will his mandate allow for those bills to be returned. And what we are promoting within those bills is a recognition of the actor's right as contained in the Beijing Treaty, which is an extension of audiovisual rights to actors that say that actors now have a right to earn royalties through the exploitation of their work. And in fact, when these royalties are collected, that they are done so within a regulated environment, and then that they are paid. So you can imagine the impact this will have on actors' lives, the sustainability of their careers, and the industry as a whole.
Let's talk about the role of the Department of Trade and Industry. It seems that that department and the Arts and Culture Department are the ones that the President has specifically tasked with being able to hold some kind of consultations between his officials and the industry to try and get as broad feedback as possible. At least that's the perspective that has come out of the Portfolio Committee. To the extent that that is the case, do you think that the process itself has been accommodative of all the voices in the industry?
Indeed it has, and particularly so through the DTI,
sure.
Which had its technical working group, and that was just prior to the bills being sent through to the Portfolio Committee. But for many years before that, there's been extensive consultations, exhaustive in fact, and the DTI will indicate the sheer number of submissions that were made to the DTI and to Parliament, with interested organizations, parties, individuals, stakeholders, all giving their suggestions and recommendations on how the bills can be adapted in order to amend the existing statutes, in order to reform the existing statutes, so that we are taken into the new arena where rights, responsibilities and obligations are now contemplated by updated bills. Because one of the things that actors have been calling for is for the Performance Protection Act, which dates back to 1967, which predates television, which predates the internet, which predates subscriber video on demand or other viewing platforms. That act was hopelessly inadequate to take us into the generation.
The future, sure.
The fourth industrial revolution, for example, is something that's been bandied about. If the statutory arena is not keeping pace with what's going on in the world, we need to reform that. And similarly with the Copyright Amendment Bill as well.
You bring about the role of technology, and I wonder in particular where the Copyright Amendment Bill is concerned. There have been questions about whether or not it's clear enough, especially where there's data that then is published on the internet or published digitally, and whether there's clear protection there for the creators of that content.
Indeed, and of course, I'd like to bring this back to actors because this is within the scope of work of SAGA. There is the intention of the bills is to protect the rights of the creator, is to protect their earning rights. And if we have to look at placing this conversation back in the actors' world, it is practiced around the world as part of a standard industry practice that actors will earn royalties through the exploitation of their work. So if I'm performing in a movie today, that movie will be licensed to a video on demand platform, it'll be licensed to a broadcaster somewhere else around the world. And if I, as the actor, negotiated that deal with the producer, I will earn a small percentage of what that licensing fee would be in the form of royalties. So this is exactly the kind of regime that actors around the world have. And it's something that we are lobbying for simply because it provides us with an additional supplementary income. So you don't have a situation where, even though I might be long gone, the work that I have done lives on and continues to be exploited around the world to benefit the producers and the broadcasters to the exclusion of the actors. This is a way that the bills are going to align actors' rights with industry practice around the world.
I wonder then, as this process unfolds, in which way does it need to happen to ensure that there aren't any further delays simply because of the impact that it will have on the industry? Because certainly work still continues while conversations and the legalities of some aspects of it are being questioned. So what would you want to see in this scenario?
It was interesting listening to President Ramaphosa in his closing speech at the Investment Summit. And he mentioned, here in South Africa, we don't know the meaning of the word fail. We don't find the word fail in the dictionary, which I thought was, of course, suitably metaphoric, but suitably misleading, because as an actor, I can say categorically that indeed our industry has failed us. We are not protected by any form of statute that guarantees our rights, that regulates our rights, or that regulates the area in which I work. There are no collective bargaining rights. That, of course, if you're an employee, you can be working in the motor industry, engineering, mining, manufacturing, in the corporate world, you have that protection. And actors, freelancers generally don't. So there are technicalities, obviously, that apply when considering how the bills have to be adopted. It was wonderful news that both houses of parliament had adopted the bills, but we are now at a standstill. We are waiting for the president, 222 days later, for the president to apply his mind and to decide if the word failure still exists, because certainly we feel as actors that we have been let down, we have been failed.
As far as the questions that are being raised by the president and the letters that his lawyers have sent to the various departments, do you think that these could have been raised sooner at all?
It's a very good point you raise. It speaks directly to the process of consultation. And in fact, when the South African Guild of Actors was in Parliament before the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee making our submissions in favor of both the bills, there were in the gallery a number of international organizations. They too have a vested interest in South African law because their interest is to exploit South African talent. You have production companies in South Africa that facilitate international productions so that when they are here shooting on location in this country, they then make South African talent, goods and services available to the international producers. So these South African producers have a tremendous amount of power and authority in positioning themselves as gatekeepers to work. for South African work. So they are able to attract international interest, international partnerships, and international investments by selling us cheap. When this happens, you have to wonder exactly what kind of protection do we have, knowing that internationally, whether you're talking about the US or the UK, Canada, across Europe, into Australia and South America, those industries are regulated.
There's a perception that there have been lobby groups in particular representing those who are satisfied with the status quo, as it were, who've been lobbying the president on this matter. Is that something that you can speak to? Is that probable in your eyes?
You've captured it very well. There are those organizations that have an interest in maintaining the status quo, and then you have those who are exploited. We have an interest in raising the profile and putting in a prominent place those groups, organizations, those vulnerable groups, especially whether you're talking about actors or crew as well, groups who are exploited, who have fallen in the cracks created by labor law, which doesn't protect us as freelancers, and collective bargaining rights, again, which doesn't protect us as freelancers. We have an interest in bringing these groups together so that they are speaking with one voice. And whether it's the DTI or the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture saying, we want the president to hear you, but you've got to present yourselves with one voice in solidarity. The message from SAGA very simply is, you are not going to get solidarity as long as you have those groups in the industry that are driven by a profit imperative and those who are exploited, thereby creating those profits. So we want an environment in our industry that serves all, a fair environment, and one which is able to create sustainability and appreciates those people who are supplying their services as freelancers and giving them the respect that they deserve.
Sure. What happens from here on? Have you been given any indication of how long this process that the president is currently engaged in is going to last? And what does it mean if he does decide to send the bill back to the Houses of Parliament?
The president has a constitutional mandate to accede, to ratify the bills once they have been adopted by both Houses of Parliament. That has already taken place. So the end of March was an important marker in time for us. We now arrive at 222 days later, and we are still waiting for the president to decide whether he wants to send them back under whatever constitutional concerns he has, or to sign them. And when he signs them, it initiates another process, which is creating the regulations that make the statute apply in specific nuanced areas to the industry that we work in. And that's going to be a process that's going to take years of consultation on its own.
If he sends them back?
Then I believe the lobbying will start again. Those organizations internationally who exploit South African talent and crew will be celebrating, no doubt. You have those political groups that have a lot of money being funded by organizations that maintain the power, that maintain monopolies, and they will be celebrating too. And we will no doubt find more letters like Vatiswa Ndaga's letter going to the minister expressing their horror and their abject sense of loss and abandonment by this process which thoroughly engaged with, arrived at the president's desk, hoping that he would stand for us, and then turned his back on us.